Because of the explosion inside the containment structure, the power station's internal facilities were severely damaged. With radiation levels exceeding 300 microsieverts, the place had already turned into something like hell. Even firefighters wearing full protective gear could not withstand such extreme radiation. After learning about the explosion, the evacuated villagers refused to stay and wait helplessly. When they tried to escape, they discovered the area had already been locked down. Outside the iron gates stood armed security forces, and the villagers themselves were treated as sources of contamination. At this moment, the radiation line reached the area. The person in charge slowly looked into the distance and saw ladders set up around the nuclear plant. They were trying to cool the reactor by spraying water to prevent a second explosion. However, even the combined water supply of more than a dozen fire trucks was not enough, forcing them to return to freshwater reservoirs for refills. The delay was far too great. Upon hearing this, the plant director rushed into the command room and demanded to know why seawater was not being used for cooling when the plant was located right by the coast. The officials replied that once seawater was used, the reactor would be corroded and completely ruined. In the eyes of those lawmakers, ordinary lives were insignificant. Meanwhile, firefighters began showing symptoms of vomiting, and some even collapsed unconscious. This made it painfully clear just how terrifying the effects of nuclear radiation were on the human body. At the same time, lawmakers received another alarming report. The pool storing 400 tons of nuclear waste had developed a leak. If the waste came into contact with air, it would melt down and explode, releasing massive amounts of radiation. The severity would be comparable to the power of 2 atomic bombs. The president ordered rescue teams to use helicopters to extract seawater and cool the reactor. But even a bigger problem stood in their way. The water level in the nuclear waste storage pool was steadily dropping. If the waste became exposed to air, it would trigger a second nuclear explosion, causing radiation to leak out completely. The only remaining solution was to send people into the plant to repair the cracks in the storage pool. At that point, the cooling liquid had already risen above knee level. Under such intense radiation, anyone who entered would be risking everything. Left with no choice, the president publicly apologized and pleaded with the workers who had just escaped the brink, asking them to do whatever it took to fix the cracks. The workers were furious at the request, but soon they came to understand. Their families were not far away, directly in the path of the radiation. Their own bodies were already affected by exposure. Even if they refused, there would be no real escape. Rather than waiting helplessly, they chose to take one final stand for their families and future generations. The workers put on thick protective suits, each carrying a bottle of painkillers. This would at least make things less painful if it came to the end. As they looked out the vehicle windows, countless memories flooded back. This place had once been filled with laughter and joy. Now, it was nothing but ruins. They lined up and walked into the nuclear plant. Rescue personnel standing on both sides lowered their heads in silence, paying tribute to these unnamed heroes. The group quickly reached the storage pool and began repairing the cracks, but within minutes, people started feeling unwell and the damaged section gave way again.